Nami's bringing the text in a moment. So, for those online or watching the archive, I'm Rabbi Tobin. This is B'nai Shalom. It's Monday Talmud. Today is the 29th of July, and we are beginning Chapter 4 of Tractate Sanhedrin, continuing the laws of courts, particularly witnesses. We're going to start out now with what the proper organization of a court is based on the case that's being tried. So, just like in America, most people don't know this, but you have different judicial structures based on the crime. Not everything gets you a trial by jury with 12 people. Most of your civil damages can. When the state's going to deprive you of life or property as a consequence, you can. But there are many, many things which are simply done by a judge or a panel, things like this. So we had that in Talmudic times for sure. Now, what world is being described when the Mishnah talks about how many judges there were on a court based on what the court case was? It's an interesting question because the Mishnah, as you know, is finished around this year by Yehuda Nasi in Sipuri, known among non-Jews as Sepharis, in the northern part of Israel, in the Galil, kind of in the middle of the triangle between the Kinneret and the tip of the Dead Sea and Haifa. You draw that triangle, and in there was Jewish population in the 150 to 200 years of the Common Era. That's where they lived. How much independence did they have? Did they have courts? Did they have courts of law? Were they allowed to execute somebody, or did the Romans reserve that authority to themselves? The truth is, we really don't know. What we have is we have a literature that they created as if they do this. We have no corroboration in any other literature that they actually did this. We have no actual cases documented. They didn't have archives, or if they did, they were destroyed. We do know that the Mishnah was carried to Babylonia, and in Babylonia they had courts. So they would have tried to follow this to the best of their ability, but we also have no evidence of a Babylonian Jewish court ever executing someone. The Talmudic layers don't have, when Rav Ashi sat on a capital case and executed Ploni the murderer, those cases don't exist. So it seems that Jews did not have capital cases, executions, courts for death penalty as an active thing. We just don't know. Mostly because they didn't have the authority of the state. There wasn't anywhere where Jews in the 3rd century or the 4th century or the 5th century of the Common Era had actual juridical control over the territory they lived on. They were in somebody else's empire. They were
So the Romans killed the Jews?
So in 180 of the Common Era, if a Jew in Sipuri committed a murder, would there be a Jewish court that tried him? The Roman court would have a lot to say about that. The Roman court would certainly not let the Jewish court happen without their blessing. So if a Jewish court functioned, it was only because the Romans permitted it.
Well, does it differ if the Jew killed a Jew or if the Jew killed a Roman?
If the Jew killed a Roman, the Romans would take over the law completely. Okay, so these are all separate pages? All right, thank you. Okay. The Jewish law, Jewish halakha, generally does not apply to Jewish and non-Jewish litigants because the non-Jew is just not going to accept the Torah as an authoritative document for law. So if you are in a Jewish state, then the Torah theoretically can be the law, but even in the Second Commonwealth, when the Second Temple was up, Roman law was the law of the land. I mean, we have an expert in the field sitting to your left who could speak a little better to it than me. You wouldn't, when the Christian text in its anti-Semitic form has the trial of Jesus and his execution under Pontius Pilate, those texts have an agenda. That agenda is to determine that the Jewish people rejected the Son of God and caused his death And his death was so full of grace that it was even for the forgiveness of their sin, right? That's a much neater and tidier story if the Jews killed him. The fact that the story has to say there was a Herod trial and a Pontius Pilate trial and a Pontius Pilate ceremony, and the Jews demanded that he do it, and then Pontius Pilate reluctantly washing his hands of innocent blood, because we know Pontius Pilate didn't like innocent blood, ha ha ha, goes ahead and executes the guy, right? That story can only be written death under Roman law in Jerusalem. Otherwise, the story would have had that happen.
So they gave it over to him.
I don't know if they gave it over. That gives them the power to give it over. I don't think Rome would have given them the power to have that level of authority over their courts.
He was executed as a rebel. I mean, in the worst possible way. Like Rex Judaeorum, like the king of the Judeans, which means it's an insurrection. Whether he was or not, can't get into his head or his mind. But he was executed as a matter of sedition.
As a political rebel.
So that would have definitely been under the Roman purview. So, however
right.
the Gospels were written 40, 50 years after the fact,
right.
with all the agenda that Rabbi
But
Tobin mentioned.
was it sedition against Rome, or was it sedition
So,
against the Jewish court?
Well, the question is, for the Jews, was Jesus a heretic who could be executed under Torah law for some form of heresy or idolatry? And that's why in the New Testament there is this whole ruse trial before Herod, where they demand that he say, what is the greatest mitzvah? And he answers, Shema Yisrael, right? He gives a good Jewish boy answer. He doesn't say anything heretical in front of them. Are you the king of the Jews? You say that I am. He defers everything. Even with his own followers, the night before he's arrested, they say, you're the Messiah, Son of God, and he bade them tell this unto no one. He doesn't affirm or deny. It's like the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Same thing. He knew people were saying it, and he never told them to stop. So does that mean he encouraged it? Does that mean he didn't believe it mattered? Does that mean what? We don't know. It's an argument from silence. But he didn't do anything overtly heretical. He didn't bow to an idol. He didn't sacrifice to another god. He didn't pollute the temple. He broke Shabbos one day. They weren't executing everyone for breaking Shabbos. Other than that, it's hard. I mean, he taught teachings contrary to Torah law. In the Sermon on the Mount, he talks about divorce, and he deliberately quotes and contradicts Torah law. He does it in a couple of ways. So he's a heretic. I mean, how can he do that? He can only do that because, one, he's ignorant of the actual Torah, which makes no sense since he quotes it. Two, he's a Torah rebel who's coming to teach on his own authority where the Torah should be broken, which would have really ticked people off. Three, he's actually the Son of God, and therefore he has the authority to do this, which also would have ticked people off. Four, he's insane. He's a nut job who had followers. Let's not do that to Christianity. Let's not accept the divinity because we're Jews. And we're left with two things to kind of realistically look at. He either didn't know he was doing it on his own personal authority, right? Or he didn't know it was a contradiction. Well, let's not call him stupid and ignorant either.
Yeah.
So, on his own authority, he was teaching things that contradicted the Torah. On his own authority, he said, I can go harvest this sheaf on Shabbat.
I can perform miracles. I can
On my own authority, anyone who divorces a woman and remarries commits adultery. Therefore, divorce is not allowed. On his own authority. Right? So that's what he did. That would have made people very mad at him. And it might have wanted people to bring him up on charges and get him to say something that would get him in more trouble. And he's obviously smart, and he avoids that. So he's handed over to Pontius Pilate without a death penalty offense having occurred. So Pilate accuses him of sedition. They say you're the king of the Jews. You've got all these people following you, and they say you're the king of the Jews. Are you the king of the Jews? And same thing, he says, you say, not me. And so they're all stuck. Nobody wants him. They all want him dead. They all want to get rid of him. They don't have a way to do it. And so it's done, but it's done by Rome.
The Sanhedrin didn't recommend the death penalty.
They had no basis to convict him. Now they could have, if the Shabbat story were in Jerusalem as part of the Passover, the arrest, and the crucifixion, the Passion stories, then they would bring the Shabbat story forward as you broke Shabbos publicly, and like the guy who gets stoned to death for gathering branches, you too get stoned to death. We have a death penalty law for breaking Shabbos. That could have been done. But the Shabbat breaking story isn't part of the Passion story in Jerusalem. It's a different place in their literature and history, so it's not linked to the conviction of him as a heretic. Right? So all they're left with is sedition, political revolts, and Pilate, the last thing Pontius Pilate would want is anybody who's gathering crowds of 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people talking about the true kingdom of God on earth. That would have been threatening to the Romans.
When did the Jews leave Rome?
Jews leave Rome?
Did they leave Rome?
What do you
Or
mean?
They stayed there.
Jews were in Rome throughout the Second Temple period, in the Italian peninsula, straight through uninterrupted settlement of Jews on the Italian peninsula from, you would have to assume trade routes, First Temple times until today. There have been some Jews living on the Italian peninsula. It was the center of the world. If you were on a ship in the Mediterranean and you had business dealings, then you've got an office somewhere in Italy.
Do each one of these four transgressions that you just mentioned call for death penalty, or are they aggregate? Or
Each individual.
People get angrier and angrier.
In the Torah, you have an act, and it's called a death, and it says mot yumat, he shall be killed. So you break Shabbos, death penalty.
Oh,
Right?
okay.
You use God's name in a heretical manner, death penalty. Bow down to an idol, death penalty. Those are each death penalty things. The only one of those that he does is break Shabbos, and nobody ever brings it up.
How did he break Shabbos?
He gathered some wheat on a Saturday to make a point. It's part of a side story.
At least his disciples did, and he justified it.
Yeah, they did. He authorized the behavior.
In his case, he's going between two different jurisdictions, because he comes from the Galilee, which at the time was actually under one of Herod the Great's sons.
Right, was
And-
not under Pilate.
And that was under, they may have had a softer hand with them.
Yeah, he did all this
Yeah.
stuff up north, and he
Yeah.
never got in trouble.
Right.
He comes to Jerusalem for the holiday, and the next thing you know, they nail him up.
Because they're under direct Roman rule at that particular moment. The Romans have less patience with potential rebels, if anything. So, and in many cases, the Jewish elite need to mediate the fact that you have rebels coming up, and if you don't take care of local problems, whatever that might be, it could lead into open rebellion, and they
Right.
start executing elites.
So-
So they're in a weird in-between position.
They are.
Whatever their role was, but it certainly wasn't an execution, and a role to execute. They didn't have the legal right to execute.
And definitely not in Jerusalem
No.
under Pilate, which was direct rule from Rome. So, whether they had the authority to declare a chicken kosher is in question under Pilate by that point. Things were bad. In any event, the question we have is, in the peaceful time up north when the Mishnah is being put together, did they actually have the courts that we're about to study? And the answer is, we don't know. And we don't know for a couple of reasons. One is, there's no other authority writing a literature at this time. We don't have, the Christians haven't institutionalized yet by the year 150, and where they are institutionalizing, it's along the coast of Turkey and over in Greece and a little bit in Rome. They're not doing it in the Galilee. That's not where they're settling. Second, we do know that in the early 4th century of the Common Era, there is a massive earthquake that destroys every city in the north, most of which do not get rebuilt, which is why we have such great archaeology there, because it's a snapshot in time. The city of Beit Shan, it's an immense city with a temple on the mountain overlooking and so forth, is just wrecked, and it doesn't come back. And that would have been a population of 10, 15,000 people who are just gone, refugees from that point. So we don't have, so had there been records, all the political structures and institutions that would have been invested in keeping those records are really gone by the middle of the 4th century. And at that point, that area goes economically in decline as well, and it becomes the backwaters of a bunch of different splits in the kingdom, and and then it just nothing survives.
When was this earthquake? I'll
Three
tell you why.
340? Is
The
that
tour
it?
guide,
42,
the
something like
tour
that?
guide that we had in Israel, when I went with my children,
It's a Googleable
said,
thing.
we're not really worried about the Palestinians. The anniversary of this earthquake is coming. And he said, we're more concerned about that. It was very interesting.
Who were these people?
I mean,
Your tour guide, you said, told you this?
yeah.
Oh.
No, I had 7 people, and I did the thing through a Palestinian.
363.
Through an Israeli tour group.
That's about the time that the story of rebuilding the temple under Julian happened.
That's exactly what
And
it
that's
is.
that with the earthquake, it fell apart, and
Yes,
right.
yes.
Good.
Geographically, they've got it as 363.
Mhm.
Some say 365, or maybe there was a follow-up aftershock. But yes, it was during the reign of Emperor Julian. Okay? In any event, the bottom line is we don't know. My instinct may be colored by the fact that I've spent too much time in medieval studies, and I'm thinking of, under the Roche in Toledo in Spain, for example, where they arrest somebody, and if it's a flogging or anything, they convict them in the Jewish court and hand them over to the local duke, pay him money, and the duke's henchmen have their way with whoever the poor slob is who just got convicted by the Jewish court. So they do floggings, they chop off hands, they do death penalty at the hands of the Goyish court. So that's kind of a go-to plan in the Rhineland, in France, in Spain. I don't know if we have a case in Provence that does that, but that's kind of from 1100 to 1400. That's what we did. So we didn't have, we might convict somebody of it, but the threat was, don't make us send you to the Duke. Right?
Well, this was the practice even for the Spaniards, even for the general population. This is what they did.
Yes, yes. So they had the authority to do those things. We didn't. They would never have let us do it, but they would do it for us, and of course we would have to pay for that. So I might be reading that into this time period inappropriately, but on the other hand, it's not entirely illogical. All right, so here we go. With all of that background, we don't know if this is a Baba Maisa or if this is history, but it's a very specific Mishnah, so let's do it. The first Mishnah of this chapter. Echad dinei mamonot ve'echad dinei nefashot. Money cases and capital cases. Capital means death penalty. B'drisha uv'chakira are subject to both inquiry and questioning. So if you remember, chakira and drisha was the split. There are specific questions that establish that you had the ability to see what you thought you saw. They'll ask you the day of, well, they're going to go into it, I think. Do they go into it here? That's a later Mishnah. They ask you the day of the week. They ask you the week of the month. They ask you the month of the year. They ask you the year in the sabbatical cycle. They ask you the place you were in and the time of day. And if you can name all of those things, then you could be a reliable witness. And then they go on and they do the drisha, which is the supplemental questions. So Hakira is establishing that you are a potential real witness. You were actually in the time and place, and that's when it happened. And Drisha is then I say, what color shirt was he wearing? Why were you there? All the other kind of questions that Perry Mason asks to get at the truth. Okay? All right. Shne'emar mishpat echad yelachem, and they're going to base this on a Torah verse, which gets used 1,000 different ways in Judaism. There shall be one law for you, and they're using it here to say one law for capital case and monetary case. Obviously, the two are going to be treated differently, or we wouldn't have different words for them. Ma ben dinei mamonot li dinei nafshot. So what are the differences? Dinei mamonot b'shlosha. Money cases have 3 judges. V'dinei nafshot b'esrim shlosha. Capital cases have 23. Dinei mamonot potchim ben li zechut ben lechova. If it's a money case, the first witnesses can either be to acquit or to convict. It could be a hostile witness or a supporting witness. It doesn't matter. Money, you just start getting the information out and you deal with it. Dinei nafashot potchim lizachut ve'ein potchim lechova. the first impression of the court has to come from those who are testifying to acquit someone accused of a capital case. So we're going to see that every institutional choice here is going to be to make it more likely you're going to acquit a person than you're going to convict a person. So they're creating a structure that keeps tipping you towards acquittal, right? If he's guilty, they're going to convict him. But if there's any procedural thing that we can do to give more credence or more opportunity to let him be let off the hook, we're going to do that. Capital cases have to start with zechut, with acquittal arguments. Money cases can be decided in a majority of one. In other words, since you have 3 judges, 2-1 decides the case. Okay, whether to get him off the hook or to make him liable to pay a fine. But if it's a capital case, you can't have it be, let's say you have 23 judges on the case. You can't have it, you can't be 12-11. You have to be at least 13 to convict. 12-11, even though it's a majority, is not enough to execute him.
But now, of course, now they can. Because I checked this 23.
Nowadays?
Yeah, you can do 12-11.
Yes, in American law,
Right,
where they
right,
have
law.
23 and a grand jury or whatever, a majority of any kind rules the day.
Right.
There's 23 in a grand jury,
There
Yeah.
are.
usually,
That's
in the
what's
state of New
that's
New
Jersey.
Jersey.
Right, that might go state by state though,
Yeah.
right?
But isn't that crazy?
23 on a grand jury in New Jersey. But on a capital trial itself, it's still the same number?
It would still be a 12.
12,
That's a jury.
right.
The
By-
grand jury to
right,
determine whether or not to send it to
right,
trial
For indictment,
is of 23.
right, okay.
And-
And we're talking about.
And it has to be 13-10.
In the rabbinic system, it's 23 judges to try the case,
Right.
and to convict him and execute him. 13 of the 23 have to have voted to convict him.
You gotta win by 2. Right?
You have to win by 2,
And you
which is really
only
winning
need
by 3.
2 witnesses,
Right.
even for. a
Still only
capital
need 2
case.
witnesses. Al pi
Only two.
shnayim yakum davar, that's written in the Torah. 2 witnesses, but you need to convince 13 of the 23 judges, which is not a majority of 2. It's a majority of
Right.
2.5.
Right.
Because 12 and 11, so you have to go 13 and 10. All right, dinei mamonot machzirin bein lezechut bein lechova. In a money case, it can be reversed, either to make him pay or to let him off the hook, based on subsequent information. Dinei nafshot machzirin lezechut ve'en machzirin lechova. But after the case is over, you can overturn a conviction in a capital case, but you cannot overturn an acquittal. Okay? Dinei mamonot hakol milamdin zechut lechova. In money cases, anyone may argue to obligate him or to let him off the hook. In dinei nefashot, hakol milamdim lizchut, ve'en hakol milamdim chova. But in capital cases, anyone can start for acquittal, but not for conviction. And we understood that this, I believe, was the order that the judges speak their view. The milamed here means the judge saying, I believe it should, all the witnesses are done, evidence is done, judges have discussed among themselves. In a case of capital conviction, the youngest judge speaks first. The second youngest second, and the eldest senior
So they
judge
each
third.
speak?
Well, they're going to talk to each other.
Oh, okay.
Right? So, picture you have 3 umpires in a baseball game, right? And then something serious happens. So they all huddle out there. Nobody knows what they're saying. If the crew chief stares at the other 2 and says, he was out, it makes it very hard for the other 2 umpires to say, you're wrong. Right? So in this case, if he's going to be convicted of a capital crime, you don't let the senior judge speak first, to make sure every judge is fully speaking their mind.
But who pronounces the sentence?
Well, then they talk among themselves, and they come out, and the senior judge announces that we have decided,
senior judge.
and they don't announce the vote. We saw that in our last chapter, that you're not allowed to tell afterwards that the
Who
vote was this
voted
way,
for
and that
what?
way, look, I was going to let you off, but I got outvoted. You're not allowed to do that.
So it's the senior judge who pronounces the verdict.
We find you this or that, but we don't give the actual vote. All right, dinei nafshot, hakol melamdim zechut ve'ein hakol melamdim chova. So who speaks is important in a capital case, but in a monetary case, it doesn't matter which judge talks first. Dinei mamonot hamelamed chova melamed zechut. In money cases, one who advances an argument for liability may later advance an argument for non-liability. So I've got a hostile witness, and that witness can then give exculpatory evidence. Let him off the hook. Same witness, right? So can a witness do that? One witness give conflicting testimony? Well, maybe it's two real pieces of testimony, one of which is damning and one of which is freeing. So once he's being used to damn you, can you also use him to free you? Right? They're worried about that. So, ha-melamed zechut melamed chova. One who advances an argument for non-liability may advance for liability. However, dinei nefashot, but in capital cases, ha-melamed chova melamed zechut, if you testified to convict him and have him executed, you can then give testimony that can also let him off the hook. That's fine. Aval ha-melamed zechut ein yachol lachzor lelamed chova. Once you give testimony that the guy should not be convicted, you're not allowed to go back and change your mind and say, wait a minute, I was wrong, he really did it.
And this brings up the question of whether the former one in the Dinei Mamonot was also like a chazara, like he returned, like he recanted in a sense.
Right.
This is already a recanting.
Oh, wait a minute, he did
prior-
pay me back.
That kind of thing.
Oh, I'm
Right.
sorry about
Yeah.
that. Or wait a minute, he didn't pay me.
Yeah.
I was wrong,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, you come back and you correct yourself, right? All right. Dinei nafshot danim bayom v'gomrim bayom. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Dinei mamanot danim bayom v'gomrim balayla. So a monetary case can happen during the day. The sun goes down. The judges are still talking about it. They come to a verdict, and at 10 o'clock at night, they announce it. Here's the verdict. Gavel comes down. The guy has to pay. But dinei nafshot danim bayom gomrim bayom. You must conclude the capital case during the day. What does this do?
You can't change anything.
Makes it very hard to go back and
Once the sun goes
change it, perhaps.
And he's stoned the next
Yeah.
day.
What do you
I-
need
I-
to finish a court case in one day?
Unless the witness's family is intimidated.
Is it the same day or
They can't
making
change
sure
his
that
mind
it's
then.
during the day? Meaning in the sense of like, by parallel, I heard a story once, the best time to go before the parole board is right after lunch, right?
'Cause they're feeling good?
That's when the parole board is the happiest. And so I wonder here also, there's Danim Bayom, Gomrim Bayom, it could be another Yom, as long as they would go home and take recess.
It could be
And
the
not be
language.
exhausted.
The language allows for that.
And-
My sense is, the way I'm reading it, is that it has to be done in a day.
Mm.
And I think that fits the culture of the Mishnah, because what would that do? That would force you to only convict him on the preponderance of clear evidence. Right? We opened the court, two witnesses came in, we checked them out, we asked them the questions, it was a clear and perfect case, guilty. We can finish our disputation during the day. Right? If the jury comes back quickly, what do they say that means?
Guilty.
It's clear.
It's a clear conviction,
Right.
right? Usually the longer the jury sits out there, the better it is for the defense.
Right.
You have a holdout, there's a lot of questions, there's doubts. A jury that comes back quickly is usually convicting, they say, right? So they bought the state's case. Here, I think what it does is, if it is this one day, then it creates a circumstance in which the evidence has to have been really clear for you to convict him. Now, if it's only during the day, then it adds this other level of things should be done in the light of day, and nothing should be forced or hurried, or no one should be tired, they should all be awake. You can make arguments for why that would be too.
Yeah, it's because you have this, I guess you could say a positive side, it would be a speedy trial, because it would be done the same day, right? In the sense that it would have to be clear-cut evidence, and the question would be, well, if you couldn't finish it in one day, would it then just be like our version of a hung jury, and then it
Yeah.
would be acquitted by dint of the fact you didn't finish it in the same day? I mean, I don't know how the rest of the Gemara plays out in this particular case. There's a law in the Mosaic Law Code where someone burrows under your home.
Yeah.
At night,
Yep.
you're allowed to kill
During the
them.
day, you cannot kill a break-in
Right.
and call it self-defense, but during night, if the person breaks in, you can kill him, and his blood is on him. There's no
Right.
retribution.
Meaning there's sort of, it's difficult, it's confusing during nighttime.
You can't
conditions
see
to
as
know
clearly. It's more
what his-
dangerous.
yeah,
it's more-
what his
It's a
intentions are.
fine line.
I mean, and I
Maybe.
don't wanna hold up on that particular
Look,
point. Yeah.
it would make a great sermon.
Right.
Right? The symbolism of night and dark and danger and knowing and all that, it's
Yeah.
great stuff.
How long's the day?
All right, stop it. Actually, rabbinically, it's clear. The day is sun up to sundown, no matter how many or few
Or
hours
sundown?
that is.
Okay, so it's shorter during the winter.
Yeah. Dinei nafshot gomrim bo b'yom l'zichut, of yom shelacharav chova. Okay, monetary cases are concluded on the day. Dinei mamanot gomrim bo b'yom bein l'zichut bein l'chova. Monetary cases are concluded on the day, whether for liability or non-liability. Dinei nafshot gomrim bo b'yom l'zichut. You acquit him on the day. Uvayom shela'acharav l'chova. But only on the following day if you're going to convict him.
That answers the case.
So, but it doesn't, because it said something contradictory 2 sentences ago. So they have to be compatible. So you finish the court case in the day, and if he's off the hook, you announce the verdict immediately. If he's guilty, you don't announce the verdict yet. You announce the verdict tomorrow during the day. At night, they are not continuing to try the case, and they are not continuing to dispute the case. They are holding the verdict unannounced if it's guilty until the next day.
Well,
You have
didn't
to
you
close
say
it just
that
in case.
Okay.
they could bring a witness,
Yeah,
on
so
a
what does
capital
that
case?
do?
Right. Is there another witness could come forward and say?
Right.
"Hey, wait a minute."
Look, the maid is sitting at home. She didn't go to court because the evidence was obvious. They're never going to convict him in a million years. Now she hears on the evening news they convicted him. They didn't announce the verdict. So now we know he's been convicted, but they won't announce the verdict until tomorrow. Now people can go and they say, you have to go and give evidence. They're going to execute him. It gives time for new evidence to come in overnight that would overturn it. And remember, you can overturn it if he's been convicted. Why do you need all this? Because once he's convicted, they just execute him. There's no death row. You need to create that space to theoretically have the time that you could overturn that verdict. Right?
Once you pull the switch, you can't go back.
Correct. So let's back up and see why I have to read it this way. Because it said, Dinei mamanot danin bayom v'gomrim balayla. Monetary cases are tried in the day and concluded in the evening. Dinei nafashot danin bayom v'gomrim bayom. They finish it in the day. Dinei mamanot gomrim bo bayom bein lizichut bein lechova. So bo bayom, they could do monetary cases on that same day, whether or not he's being convicted. Dinei nafashot gomrim bo bayom lizichut uvom uvayom la'acharav lechova. They can't convict him and announce that on the same day.
and
It's
not on
got to wait
Sabbath.
till the next day.
And what if it comes out on the Shabbos? They can't do that.
Then, well, read the next sentence. Lefichach ein danin lo be'erev Shabbat velo be'erev Yom Tov. And that's why you can't have a Beit Din on Saturday, on Friday, because you don't have the possibility to wait till the next day and have a court where they come and they give testimony, because there's no courts on Shabbos. So you can only do a Beit Din up to Thursday. You can't do a Beit Din on Friday. Dinei mamanot hatumot v'hataharot matchilin min hagadol. So in judges of monetary cases, as well as Tum and Tahara, the Rosh Beit Din is the first to speak because it's his kavod. But Dinei nefashot matchilin min hatzad. But in capital cases, you start all the way down at the end of the table with the least of the judges, who gives his opinion, and then the next least, and the next least, and the next least. Hakol ksherin ladun dinei manot. Anybody can be a judge in monetary cases. The ein hakol ksherin ladun dinei nefashot, but not so in capital cases. Ella kohanim leviim v'yisraelim hamasiin la cheuna. The only people who could be judges in capital cases are people who are eligible to marry Kohanim.
Now, if he's convicted, didn't they have sanctuary cities? Could he run to a
Only if he's convicted of accidental killing. If it's murder, he can't go anywhere. They can pull him off the horns of the altar and execute him. He's been convicted of murder. The sanctuary cities are for people who accidentally killed somebody.
Oh.
And they live in a safe
So
haven.
how do they hold him if there's no prisons? How do they hold him? He
They
can
don't.
run
They
away.
don't hold him.
Huh?
He stays there because he wants to stay there. If he leaves, the family of the dead guy gets to kill him. He's not going anywhere. Well, you know, the fences in our world, the prison walls keep the prisoners in. In their world, the prison walls keep the Avengers out. Remember, what could they do? They could flog you, they could fine you, they could banish you, they could kill you. Those are the only punishments they had. There are no prisons. And there's no such thing as probation. Right? Okay, questions about the Mishnah?
Yeah, I'm just curious about the interplay in a particular moment between the Dinin Nafashot Kumbuim Bo Bayom L'Schut
Yeah.
Bayom Shalach L'Chova. I mean, some of it, obviously, none of it will be clear for the sake of the Gemara argument that we're going to get into. It'll be, Nafuch Nafuch Bo. We're going to turn it over and over. But this particular part is curious to me about how they will attempt to solve that, if there is more complications to add. I'm just thinking, on its face,
There are complications
Right.
to add.
so clearly. So I don't know,
And
I
if
don't
you-
want to preempt that by,
And if you're in Pacific Coast time zone normally, right?
right.
So if you make Mondays at 9 a.m. part of your regular routine, in about 2 months or so, we'll get to that point of the Gemara.
Right. Yeah, so I don't want to anticipate a lot of that.
Yeah,
It's-
no.
It's curious, I mean, how you would have it, acquittals done the same day and convictions done the day after. So then what would be you can think about the hypotheticals here, and you could go on for a long time about those hypotheticals. Like, what if you needed more to acquit? What if you only figured out the next day that it was actually exculpatory evidence came to play, and then you have to, can you acquit on the second day, even though it says clearly not to? I mean, there's a lot of different gray areas.
I think by the second day, he's dead.
The second day of the trial.
If it's a capital case,
Right.
I don't think you have a second day of the trial.
Well, then one wonders about the.
You have a second day when exculpatory evidence will be admitted and he can be let off the hook.
Because you can have the next day for chovah, so that's for the conviction,
Right.
right? So, meaning, what if there's exculpatory evidence which shows up on the second day, that get him off?
If they've announced the verdict,
Mhm.
he's dead. They take him outside and they kill him.
Is
There's-
it just about announcing the verdict or continuing with the trial? Gomrim, what does
Once
Gomrim mean?
once he has been, this is announcing the verdict. Gomrim means they announce the verdict.
Mhm. Mm.
The next day, not the same day.
In capital cases, it's the next day. On monetary cases, it can be this day, it can be at night, it could even be the next day.
So we're saying regardless that a capital offense is gonna be done in the same day, just as that you're taking Gomrim as the announcement of the
I think
verdict.
it's the announcement of the verdict. I think it buys an overnight period of time for exculpatory evidence to surface.
It has to be overnight. It's like the crack of dawn, they're gonna announce it.
I don't know.
I
Maybe
mean, in the sense of like.
12, noon, kid's got an orthodontist appointment.
Right. So then he's not really dead until they would announce it. I mean, it's
At
just that
some
it's-
point that next day,
Right.
when they announce the verdict in court,
Right.
they take him out and they kill him.
Mhm.
So what I'm saying is, once it's announced, the execution is summary.
Mhm.
So you're not going to have him being held while they prepare the gallows.
Right. I mean, in the sense of like allowing, is it the trial that can continue for conviction? The trial can continue theoretically 2 days.
That I think the language of the Mishnah is ambivalent,
Mhm.
and I'm reading it as the case has to be clean in 1 day.
Mhm.
Nothing's happening overnight while the news spreads
Right.
that the verdict was not announced, therefore
Right.
everyone knows he's guilty. And the next day in court, they're going to gather everybody and they're going to do the announcement followed by the execution.
And not to take this out too long, just one extra point on this. The whole thrust of this is to make it as difficult as possible to convict anyone. Right.
That puts an obstacle,
Right,
a waiting period, a cooling off,
Right.
an opportunity. You're allowed to overturn it if something comes up. all of these things make it harder to convict.
So in light of like all the various moments of witnesses and judges and making it harder to convict, as hard as possible to convict someone of a capital crime,
And as easy as possible to let them off the
let
hook.
them off the hook, one would think potentially that you would allow for an acquittal trial to go as long as possible, see, until you would almost invite exculpatory evidence, right? In that level, whereas in order to allow for that to happen.
Okay, but Yiftach, what's the problem with that point of view?
You're doing a speedy justice, but is that the problem in the case of like someone who's being put on trial for that?
What is the purpose of Mishnah? Big picture. Let's go back to 30,000 feet. What is Mishnah? What's the purpose of halacha?
Is it a guide to life?
That is a really warm and fuzzy 21st century way to phrase it. Not quite.
I mean, it's
Well, usually the deliberations take a long time, even in a monetary case. First, they have to decide who the judges are, then they have to decide if the witnesses are kosher.
Why? Why go through all that trouble? Why do we spend so much time talking about these things? What are we doing?
well, the mission is the process of study. I mean, in the sense of like, what are we doing when we're studying? When we're studying Mishnah?
Why?
Well, study is, of course, a replacement for, in some ways, study and prayer, a replacement for sacrifice, as far as that's concerned. What we're doing when we study this business, even if we think about the applicability, if this is never applied, and it's a matter, it's just theoretical.
Well, we're not talking about sacrifices. We're talking about stuff they can do.
Right. Well,
Why? I mean, studying sacrifices is a
Right.
substitute for sacrifices. Studying this law is to do it. For them, writing the Mishnah, right? Theoretically, they're not doing all this to make up a system that nobody should ever do. The purpose is to do it. But what is the whole point of all the Mishnahs put together? Shishasti Drei Mishnah. The entire corpus of Mishnah exists for one purpose.
To form laws.
And what are laws?
Laws that people should abide by.
We're getting there because
Because you want a society that's just not running rampant, but
the fish just got off the hook.
it's an ideal Jewish state.
What does that mean? You are all so modern. You're stuck.
Huh.
All this, I mean, you're Plato in the Republic and the perfect society, and it'll feel good, and we have a process of learning which is nobling and replacing of. No, none of that is why Mishnah exists. That is that's our experience of Mishnah. That's our justification for why people should be studying Mishnah today in a world where they're not going to do any of this, which I would argue with, because Jews should be doing the vast majority of what's still in Mishnah. Is still very applicable. But, all right, I'll let you off the hook. The purpose of Mishnah is to determine the will of God. The purpose of Gemara is to determine the will of God. That's it. It's halakha. It's what does God want. When you determine how to make a microwave kosher, you're not just trying to create a system that we're all going to agree upon so that we can have communal norms. You're trying to determine how God wants you to use that microwave. That's the Mishnah's frame of reference. That's the Mishnah's own self-understanding. The rabbis of the Mishnah are seeking the will of God and trying to codify it so that as many people as possible can do the will of God in this covenant relationship. So you're not going to create a dilatory process to escape the execution forever, because that's surreptitious and undermining of the mandate in the Torah, mot yumat. That's a mitzvah. I know people want to say mitzvah is a good deed and a blessing. It's not. Mitzvah means command. So when it says, he shall surely die, that's a command to kill him. You are commanded, if a person does this, this, or this, to kill him. That is the will of God that you do that.
Right.
So when
It's
they
like an eye
do,
for an eye.
fine, that's the will of God. God might have not had that will. He might have said, let him go, give him a back rub. But that wasn't the will of God. The will of God is execute him. So once they've determined that he's guilty of the Torah offense for execution, they are now under the weight of a mitzvah. And you don't delay a mitzvah. Ratzli devar mitzvah. You have to eagerly and quickly do a mitzvah when it's in front of you. Right? That's what you're supposed to do. So if you're in shul and you've got your talis and tefillin in front of you and somebody wants to talk about the weather, you're supposed to delay the weather conversation and put on the talis and tefillin. You're supposed to do the mitzvah first.
Well, who does the stoning? The judges?
Depends on the form of execution, but this would have been, there's a whole system by which the person was killed. It took a cooperative effort of trained people.
Just to be precise, what you're saying is about the speediness of this
Yeah.
trial on that day itself.
Once he's guilty, you are commanded to kill him. So they don't announce the verdict because they're not mitzuveh to kill him until the verdict is announced, until it's gomrim.
Right, right. So I mean, but we go back to Doraita. Mot yumat bo'oto yom, on the same day.
It doesn't say Be'oto Yom.
So in that, and this is, I think, the rub. I'm with you totally about the will of God, the mind of God. But
Right, and which is you have to
Right.
shift that, because
But
why do you have all these things happening in the Gemara?
Mhm.
But Rabbi so-and-so said this, and Rabbi so-and-so said this, and if you did it this way, you did it this way, but if you were arguing that, then this. Are they just playing mental games?
And we're separating the Gemara from the Mishnah in this particular case, as far as the will of, because it's
No, the Gemara's
Okay.
purpose is to determine the will of God as well.
So in that regard, it's a little bit more expansive. I wouldn't see it as so apodictically oriented. Meaning it's a rather broad and expansive, what they think they're doing when they do what they do, the will of God, the mind of God, sure. But clearly, the spirit of this particular moment when it comes to Dinei Nafashot is to make it as difficult
Yes,
as possible.
yes.
In every particular case to ever put
So
someone
let's
to
be
death. And that-
really subversive for a moment.
Yeah, and the idea is that what, the bloodthirsty court put one person to death in 70
Yehuda
years?
Nasi here
Mhm.
does not like the will of God,
Uh-huh. That's one way of looking at it, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The editor of the Mishnah is hesitant.
Mhm.
He's hesitant. And he's hesitant for a good rabbinic reason, which is midat harachamim.
Mm.
All right? So the measure of mercy, hine yom din. We stand on Yom Kippur and we declare the day of judgment is at hand, and we pray that God treat us with rachamim like a father and his children.
Mm.
Right? We have din and we have rachamim. The court's purpose is din. And he's trying to create a system where rachamim can live a little. Right? And he can't do it by ignoring facts, and he can't do it by delaying the commanded. But he can create the space to make sure you have all the facts when it's going to create more mercy. Right? He does that. But you can't be dilatory. You can't intentionally create a 2 or 3 or 4 day. Now you're subverting the clear will of God. If you know he's guilty.
I mean, if it isn't explicitly written that way, though, like that it has to be in the same day, then I'd see a lot of wiggle room here, a lot of room to play. I mean, I just
Well, an
think
execution has to be in the day, and the body has to be taken down before night.
Right.
That's
that-
Doraita.
Right, but that the actual judgment has to be done in the day itself. If it's not explicitly stated that way.
Okay, but what case of Moses's in the Chumash ever had him wait a day to give an answer?
For sure. I don't know if you guys have
I
gotten.
mean, we
this
just
far.
had Pinchas last week.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
Talk about not waiting.
So, I mean, I don't want to draw this out beyond too far, but just that when it comes to the rabbinic imagination, if I want to call it that.
Yeah, sure.
You have 4 types of executions, which certainly aren't also d'oraita. What does skila mean? What does chanika?
Yeah, notice how I ducked this, what is stoning question.
So the stoning part, and the way they describe the issues of the types of execution, strangulation and whatnot, they're in their own context. I mean, they're trying to divine the will of God for sure, but they are completely, imbued with what's going on in their own day. And that particular imaginative moment is rather extraordinary, meaning in the Mishnah itself.
I understand.
I'm not going to go through the description of the devices. You bury someone in a certain pile of something, you put a metal contraption on their face, you pour molten metal down their mouth.
The exercise of Mishnah is to clarify the behavior that is best in accordance with the will of God. They may be very creative. They may be adding layers and levels to the halacha, which is why the Gemara almost always will start with something like minahane mile. Like, on what Torah basis did they say that? The Mishnah doesn't seem to be worried about minahane mile. It has its own basis and its own authority. It thinks it is ongoing Torah. And note, they write in Hebrew. Right? They know they're writing sacred text as law. Right? Otherwise they'd be writing Aramaic for the people to understand.
The Gemara is Aramaic.
The Gemara is Aramaic, which is making a claim that they're not on the same level of Mishnah as far as sacred authority in their teachings. Their job is to try and understand the Mishnah, for which they'll bring up a Baraita to understand it, but they won't challenge it themselves. Right? So I think that the rabbis of the Mishnah do absolutely see themselves as clarifying God's will to observe Torah law. The academic question, and for me academic is not a pejorative term, right? The academic question, the academic question is, what was their self-awareness? Did they understand that they were creating levels? Did they know that they weren't just a siagla to a rock, creating a barrier around it, but they were actually creating Torah? Right? Were they self-aware enough in that? And we don't know. I think they were. How could they not be? Look at the hand. When you take the Mishnah, you put it next to the Tosefta and everything else. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi knew that he was making choices with the authority of the Creator. Right? He knew that. The Gemara doesn't buy it 100%. That's why they can bring Braytod. Right?
Well,
So it's a fascinating start. The first question is almost certainly going to be minahane mile and something. Dinei mamanot mi ba'inan drisha v'chakira. So they're going to challenge the Mishnah's assumption that you need to have this boilerplate investigation of witnesses followed by continuing expository questioning in monetary cases. Because after all, you're going to have a document in front of you. You'll have the receipt, you'll have the so they're going to go on with that. And they're going to have to try and see, is there a Torah basis for it or not? By the way, Yiftach, we found in chapter 3, there were several places where it asked, is it a Torah verse or is it logic? That question came up several times in chapter 3, where people said, no, I'm just doing this based on logic, no matter what your Torah verse says. And several of the things seem to, that Savara was its own operative principle.
Nice.
Right? All right, that's it.
Nice beginning. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a fun class. Come back online.
Yeah. Can the online
Herb,
people
why are you
get
signed in online if you're sitting in front of
Are you
me?
a Californian?
Oregonian at the moment, although I hesitate to put any sort of locative